Hey there. Welcome to Guru session number 9. We are back after a little break, which was really helpful for me, I must say. So, welcome to this session, and we are going to focus this time on open sound control. And actually, normally we're doing advanced topics on Wednesdays, but I'm kind of putting this open for everyone because I think this is a super useful topic that everyone will benefit from. Some of you who might know some things about open sound control, there'll be a little repetition for you, but hopefully you can bear with me and get through that. So, at the top of the chat, you will find the link for the materials for this session. There's a file that I've prepared that you should download that contains everything you need to go along with me. But also know that this session I'm going to be working with some apps that work, on this case, on my iPad, TouchOSC, GyrOSC, and also an application called FaceOSC. Now, you can find links for those in the forum thread, which is also at the top of the chat. So make sure to get those if you want to follow along and try it at the same time I'm trying it, right? Um, and uh, and the other thing is also at the top of the chat. This past week, one of the things I did is I really cleaned up all the YouTube stuff for all these guru sessions, put them into a single directory and a knowledge base article where you can find all the links. For the last session we did where it was open questions, there's a link to every question. You can jump right to the answer in the video. So do that. And then we're going to just remember our protocol here. If you need to ask me a question in the chat as we're going along, you put @troikatronix. It makes a beautiful yellow banner so I see it. And then say question in capital letters to alert my attention to your question. But also, we're keeping track of feature requests. If you want to put a feature request, so it'd be so great if it did that. Put @troikatronix feature and then just write down your wish. We'll see what we can do, yeah? And the final thing, because I'm just like learning how to be like a YouTube person, I guess, it's really good if all of you subscribe and to the channel, right? And not only if you subscribe, but you know what would be really helpful for us is if you love Isadora and you think these sessions are interesting, tell your friends about them. When I share the information online about these sessions, share it widely, and especially maybe this coming Friday where I'm going to focus on remote performance, like what Isadora can do to help you right now to support remote performances, which includes a new actor I wrote last week, then that's a great one to share because I think that's something that everyone would benefit from right now. So if you'd like to be alerted to these live sessions, just subscribe to the channel here and you'll get notifications whenever a new video is going up. Because also we have some other tutorials coming from some of our other team members in the next week or so. So, all right, I think we're together now and we've gone through it. And so now we're going to dig into open sound control. And if you have my file, let me actually just select this. Let me go to, so you can see me and the screen. So that's going to be this one. This. Sorry, I'm just trying something here. And then yes, you see me and you see Isadora. So here's the file I prepared for you. I'm actually in this scene, but I'm going to go back to this init scene because the second scene there that says OBS scene select, that's not for you, that's for me. But in fact, it's our first moment of using open sound control today, because one of the things you do when you do these broadcasts, you have all these scenes that, like, in a moment you're going to see a scene where you can see the iPad that's connected to the computer, and to call those up you have to go over to the actual window and click it, which is really a pain. So I found a tool that allows OBS to receive open sound control. So if you take a look, just everyone, you can't use this because you're not using OBS, but just to see, here's the scene, the second scene. We have a key table watcher, and it's looking for the F keys, right? The keys at the top of the keyboard, F1, F2, F3. The key table watcher, if you don't know that actor, if you match one of those keys in the list, it outputs which line it is from on the output. So for instance, if I hit right now, if I hit F3, it says 3. If I hit F5, it says 5. Oh, you see, it changed it, right? Okay, let's go back to F4. Okay, so what's happening is it's taking that number, and the scene number that's received by this system in OBS has to start at 0. So the first scene is 0, the second one is 1. So we have to subtract 1 from this number, and then we just send that, and it's going out. You'll learn more about this actor in a minute. And so that's how I'm able to now use Isadora to switch from scene to scene in OBS, using the OSC transmit actor to send a message to OBS to change the scene. So that scene isn't for you, but if you start at the init scene and you do like me, I'm going to hit letter A, well, in a moment, because we're going to do a background scene. I'm just going to briefly say that too. I won't explain it deeply. But we want this running, I want this running all the time while I'm working with you, right? So we're going to hit letter A. It's going to activate the first scene after that, which is the OBS scene. But then it's going to do a jump over that into the first scene that we're going to work with. And so to do that, if I hit letter A, you'll see now that it's in the second scene. That's the dark blue one. That's the active scene. But also the OBS scene is running. That's what allows me to hit F whatever whenever I want to and get and to control the scenes in OBS, right? So again, that wasn't for you, but just as an example, here's OSC in action already. Okay, so if you go to that first scene and you show the stage, yeah, let me do that too. So you'll see that in the next few scenes, there's just a lot of text. And I just wrote that out because I thought it would be helpful. Because again, if you're more of a beginner and you haven't done this stuff before, I think having some written down documentation will help you. I'm not going to really read from that exactly. I'll refer to it to remind myself. But let's just start with what is open sound control? That's the first question. And it's kind of a it's not really a misnomer, but it's kind of weird, right? It sounds like something that should be controlling or doing something with sound. Well, it's actually a very generalized protocol for sending messages from one application on a computer to another. And those are usually numbers, either floating point numbers with a decimal point, or integers, the numbers without a decimal point, or text. That's actually in the open sound control specification all that you are allowed to send. So it's not, for instance, for sending video between applications. We use other tools for that. Instead, it's about sending data from one application to another, or from one device to another. You'll see that in a second. That's the purpose of open sound control. But it was actually made to control sound devices. It was sort of made as a replacement for MIDI, a high resolution, high bandwidth replacement for MIDI. But in fact, it's so useful that it's getting used for all kinds of things, as you'll see today. Yeah? So that's what open sound control is. And when we're dealing with this, the thing that we always have to do to connect them, this is a protocol that works on the internet or Ethernet, or some kind of, Wi-Fi connection between computers and devices and things like that, right? So to do that, the technical part that's not very fun that we have to do, though, is that we have to identify the IP address, that is the internet address, of your device or your computer, because that's how we know where to send the data. So as it says it down there in the text, and you can read it, but basically every device on the internet has a unique address. It's sort of true if you've got a local router, it's a little bit different, but let's just conceptually, every device on the internet has a unique address, right? And in addition to that address, which identifies, this computer has an address, my iPad over here has an address, whatever else is on the internet has an address. But in addition to that address, to be able to target certain things within the computer, there's also something called a port number, and that can go between 1 and 65535, right? So that, for instance, all the things on the World Wide Web, the web, that's port 80. It's always using port 80. That's a convention where that port is used for web communication when you use your browser, right? So we're going to use other port numbers that are free and not normally in use, right? Because together, that unique IP address and the port number, that's what gives a completely unique place that you can send data to, right? So as it says down there, To send data to a device, to an app like Isadora, or to something that you're running on another device, another application, or something like TouchOSC, which we'll see in a minute, you need to know both of those numbers. The IP address, which is in that form of 4 numbers separated by a period, and this port number, right? It's important to understand that it may be that the port number tends to come up as this, the IP address comes up the same each time you connect to the internet. It sort of tends to do that if it's a good router, but you can't depend on it. That number is dynamically generated most of the time, and that means every time you connect to the internet, it might be different. That means if you're doing a show, you need to check that every single time, because it might change and you might need to set it in whatever applications you're using. You can't depend upon that IP address always being the same. There are, if you're a little bit technical, you can set up fixed IP addresses which don't change, but that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. But I wanted to mention that. Okay, so that's about IP addresses and port numbers. That's how we have a unique address where we can send data, and in this case, open sound control data. So if you go to the next scene, what we're gonna do in a moment, we're gonna send data from this iPad into Isadora. And so we need to find out the IP address that we're working with. We made it sort of simple to do that in Isadora. You can actually just go to the Isadora preferences. If I choose preferences here, the window appears, and look here down at the bottom, local IP address 192.168.0.129. Okay, so if you need to see the address of your computer, just open the Isadora preferences. That works on both Mac and Windows. You can also go in Mac OS to the network control panel. In Windows, there's a short little command thing you can do. It's listed here at the bottom of this text, but really using Isadora this way is probably the easiest. The only place you might run into trouble is if you have a desktop Windows machine with multiple Ethernet cards in it. Then this number could be wrong. So just keep that in mind, but probably that's a very small percentage of you. So we now know that the IP address of this computer, the one I'm speaking to you on now and recording this session, is 192.168.0.129, right? Okay, so the other thing that you need to know is the port number, right? I should have stayed in the preferences because I wanted to show that. If you click on the MIDI net tab here, you'll see under Open Sound Control, there's an IP port number. The default in Isadora is 1234, okay? There is no convention for this, not like the World Wide Web where we use port 80 all the time. These numbers are just kind of made up, and you have to find one that's not in use by something else, actually. But Isadora uses 1234. Other programs will use other things. You'll see that in a minute. You can actually change that number, and we will have to do that before the end of the session. But just assume for now that Isadora is using port 1234 unless you changed it. You should check. I mean, maybe you've been working with something and you changed that port number. The examples I'm doing may not work if your port number is not also 1234. Okay. So now we know the IP address and the port number of Isadora. We know what's running on this computer, right? And so then what we have to do, we're going to start transmitting to Isadora, and we need to actually set this on whatever is going to send to it. So now I'm going to hit F5, and voila, you see the iPad over here, which is running TouchOSC. Okay? Now, if you have TouchOSC installed, great, you can follow along. If not, don't sweat it. You can get it later. It is a paid program, but I can just say that it is something that I have used for every show that I've done. It's so useful to be able to have this control surface and to walk wirelessly around the theater when you're working on something. So it's just a program that for the money, it's just a really great tool, and I highly recommend it. So, but when you start, let me actually just quit it for a second. Yeah. And I'm going to start it up again so you can see what happens. So it goes here. The first window you're going to see is this setup window. Also, I should mention, this is an Android program also. So if you have an Android tablet or phone or other kind of device, you can use TouchOSC. Now, the procedure for doing some of these settings is slightly different. It's very close, but it's still, because Android has a different way of interfacing, it's a little bit different. So look up the instructions. If you would like to work on Android, you'll have to look up the instructions for setting this up on your device on the Hexler website for TouchOSC. But for now, I'm just going to kind of go with the fact that we're going to work with iOS to do this example, right? Okay. So let's just read the text there and seeing what we have to do. In the app sending to Isadora, whatever that app is, in this case TouchOSC, there will be somewhere a setting where you can enter the destination IP address and IP port number, the target, the place where the data is going to go. Each app is going to do this differently. You'll need to consult the app's manual or documentation to find that out. So, for example, some people like to interface QLab and Isadora, like make an interface. One way of doing that is using open sound control messages to send messages from QLab to Isadora to trigger it, right? That's done in a different way. You actually put in a queue where you specify the IP address and all this other in the port number. So every program is going to work differently. That just requires a little research on your part. It's the kind of thing that if you're stuck, that's going to our forum and asking a question, someone is almost assuredly going to know the answer immediately, and you're going to get an answer quickly if you can't figure this out, right? So go ask on the forum, right? In TouchOSC, as you can see here, unfortunately I can't zoom in on that screen. I hope the text is big enough for you to see. But I'm going to go here and I'm going to click under where it says connections, it says OSC. And I click there, and now you see I've actually have the IP address I mentioned before already entered because I set it up earlier today. But I'll click here, and I'll just delete all that text. And let's enter that IP address, 192.168.0.129. Now I'm just going to actually check that to make sure I did it right. Yeah. Okay. And then the next thing is the host. That's the host IP address. That's the target. That's the terminology that they use in TouchOSC for the place the data is going. And then the next one is the outgoing port. That's that port number I talked about. And you can see that's already set to 1234, right? That's set up already. Yeah. So that's already set. The next port, which we'll get to in a little bit later, is the port coming in to TouchOSC. That's port 9000. That's what they chose as their open sound control input port. And the local IP address, like we do, to make it convenient, it shows you the IP address of this device. So the IP address of the iPad is 192.168.0.199, okay? But basically what you need here, you need that IP address of the Isadora computer, and you need the port number, the host, the port outgoing set to 1234. So I've done that. So I hit done. I hit TouchOSC up here. And now one other thing. Notice that the layout I've chosen, it's called Mix 2. There's a bunch of different layouts with different controls and widgets that you can work with. I chose this one because it's the same on both the iPad and iPhone. I would suggest that if you want to work with me on this, and you can pick that, if you just click here where it says layout, you see all the different ones you can choose. And so I'm going to, it's just already selected, but I will go here and I will click Mix 2, and now it goes back. And now we're ready to actually go in and use TouchOSC. I'm just going to scan here in case anybody asked a question in the meantime. Looks like we're good. I don't see any yellow banners. All right, so going back to Isadora. So now we've set that. You'll see in a moment when we try GyrOSC, this other app that does some nice things, the IP address, it's just all in the main window. You don't have to go anywhere. FaceOSC, which we're going to use as really kind of an example of causing some slight difficulties with setting this up, because it only sends to port 8338 unless you go in and deep down and edit a text file that's kind of cryptic, especially if you're not a programmer type. We're going to deal with that later, but I specifically chose FaceOSC because it has some limitations. You can't change this information, so we're going to deal with changing it in Isadora, right? So once that's all set up, we should be able to transmit to our device. And I'm going to go to the next scene. But here are some typical pitfalls that you're going to run into when doing this, because it's probably the first time you set it up, it may not work. It's sort of frustrating because it's very hard to tell what's going on. Why is it not working? the two most important things you need to know is that, one, you just have to be careful copying down those IP address and port numbers. You just have to be accurate when you do that. But assuming you've done that, one common mistake is that the two devices are not actually on the same network, right? So I can see here that I am on Paperclip Palace number 2 gigahertz, right? And I won't go on the iOS to show you, but I know that I checked it and it's on the same network, right? So you have to be on the same network. If you're on two separate networks, the messages will not get there. So that's the first thing you need to check. And then the other thing is, and this is especially problematic when you're teaching at schools because they introduce all this crazy security, is that the port that you've chosen to communicate may be blocked, right? This is very frequently happens at universities because they put in a lot of security protocols to prevent this kind of communication. If that port is blocked, it may be difficult in a university using their Wi-Fi to find a port number that isn't blocked. What I suggest, especially if you're a teacher, if you're ever teaching this kind of stuff to your students, get your own router. Get your own router and put it in the classroom. It doesn't even need to be connected to the internet. It just needs to be able to have the computers and the devices connect to it because it'll make the IP addresses. You won't be able to access the internet, but the computers and devices will be able to send messages to each other because if you get that router and you reset it from scratch, you're going to have something with no ports blocked almost for sure, right? So, but also for shows, when I do shows that require open sound control, I travel with my own router. I am never going to depend on someone else's system to do that when I'm doing a show. I think that's a best practice. If you're going to do shows where you need to send open sound control, especially if you need to do it on Wi-Fi as opposed to an Ethernet connection, a hard wired connection, bring your own router, okay? All right, so we're about to actually start, but I don't want to use the file I've prepared for you for this next step because you need to learn how to teach Isadora what addresses are coming from the other device. So what I'm going to do for a moment, I'm going to hide this stage and I'm going to make an empty file and just leave it. We'll leave the other file open, but I'm going to put that on top of it, okay? And you should do this too. If you have your device connected, if you've set the IP and port number up, then you should try this too if you can. If it doesn't work, don't get stuck trying to debug it right now because we'll just go along together. You'll be able to go back, watch the video, pause it, make sure everything's working, right? Okay, so if I go into the communications menu and say stream setup, right? This window is where you can set up incoming streams from either Open Sound Control or you can also see here a human interface device. That's like a game controller. Just so you know, that's another feature Isadora has. If you want to hook up a wired or wireless USB game controller, Isadora can read those messages and use them to trigger stuff inside of your patch, right? Okay, and you see there's nothing in this window yet. It's empty. So, and it's gonna, even if I move here, you can see I'm moving some sliders on TouchOSC here, nothing's happening, right? So but what you need to do to sense these inputs is hit auto detect input. And I hope, yes, when I move those sliders, you start to see items appearing there, right? So when this auto detect input is on, any open sound control message that comes into Isadora, remember, it has to be targeted at this IP address, at the right port number, 1234. But if that's set up properly, it will show up in this window. And the pieces of information it's giving you, there's this channel number, we'll come back to that. But the next thing is called the OSC address, the open sound control address. This is always in the form of a slash at the first character, and then a word or a number, and then another slash maybe, and another word or a number, and another slash. It can go on like this, right? In this case, the three items I have are fader 1, fader 2, and fader 3, or to be specific, /1, fader 1, /2, fader 2, right? And you'll see on the right that if I leave that auto detect input on the very right of the line there, you see the value coming from this. So that's a great piece of feedback because you're going to need in a moment to actually know the range of values of these things. And the easy way to see it, I can just go, okay, at the bottom it's 0, and if I go all the way to the top, it's 1. And I can tell you that typically, unless you do something yourself to change it, all of the controls in TouchOSC are 0 to 1, okay? So we've got those set up, but there's one final step. We have to assign these to channel numbers. And the reason that this is this kind of indirection, if you want to call it that, it's very much like the movie player, the movies or the sounds in the media view, right? We're going to assign numbers to recognize these inputs. And the reason that's important, maybe you're going to move at some point, I'm going to change from TouchOSC to some other kind of sensor, maybe one that measures movement of my body. And I want to change those addresses, but I don't want to have to reprogram the entire show, right? By doing this one level of abstraction or indirection, by assigning the channel number, that's the thing we're going to use in the patch to receive the data, we can change this address at any time to any other control, and then you don't have to do anything to make your patch work again. That's what's great about it, right? But of course, figuring this out is a little bit of a pain, but the typical procedure is we move the controls we're going to use. I'll do a couple more. Here's these buttons, right? They just go 1 if they're on and 0 if they're off, and let's do 1 dial, okay? So you see we have this list now, and if I say renumber ports at this point, they're all 0, it will automatically assign a port number to these. Well, why is that important? Why, it's like, why would we want to have it do it automatically? I'll tell you why. I'm going to switch now on the iPad to a different layout. This one with these two XY controllers here, okay? And I'm going to move those, okay? Well, first of all, you see these messages here, if you look on this line, /2 and /3. That was me hitting the tab at the top to go from one layout to another. That has its own open sound control message. Now, probably that's not something I really want to receive. If you want to get rid of one of these lines, I can click in the line. You see it's highlighted here, right? So that's kind of selecting the line. And you can hit the minus button. And that line is now deleted. And now also this one with the 3, I can hit minus, and that's also deleted, right? So I've now deleted those. But I have these 2 inputs. Notice on the right, there's not just one number coming from these. There are 2 numbers, because this open sound control message doesn't have a single number. It has the X and Y of this control. And so 2 numbers come out after it, right? And so if I hit renumber ports, notice that it goes here to 9. That's correct. It goes 8, the line above, then 9. But the next one is 11. That's because it takes 2 of these channel numbers to get the X and the Y. In this case, the X of that first controller is going to be channel 9, and the Y will be channel 10. If you had 3 numbers, it would be 9, 10, 11, right? So this is how assigning, this is why it's nice to just get all the things you're going to pay attention to. They'll all be 0, and then you just hit that renumber ports button, and you're going to see the port numbers associated with your inputs right there in front of you, right? So that's how we actually set up the stream setup window so we can receive messages. And if I close this, if remembering that 1, 2, and 3 are the 3 faders, if I close this now and just try it by saying OSC listener 1, and I'll duplicate this and do 2, and duplicate this and do 3. So I've set this to channels 1, 2, and 3. And let me zoom in on that. Oops, I think I should be sure you can still see the iPad when I do that. Well, here, let me just do it this way. Yeah, make it bigger. So now if I go back to number 1 here, and I move that, you see the numbers streaming in from the iPad and from TouchOSC, right? Okay. That's how you do the stream setup window. So that's an important process. You have to train Isadora all of the different open sound control addresses that are coming in from the device. It learns them in that window, and you make an association between an OSC address and 1 or more channel numbers that you use in the OSC listener, right? Okay, so I did that just so you could see the process, because in the file that I've got, I've already prepared this. You also may want to redo this in the file. You should really go through this whole process yourself to make sure you've got it. But I wanted to have a file that, in case you had TouchOSC and had this same layout as me, you can use it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this example that I just made and not save it, because if we look here in the file that you have, if I go to Stream Setup, you'll see that I've already got all of the controls in here, right? And in fact, I have more than just TouchOSC. Starting at channel number 22, I've got the ones for GyrOSC, and I've got another TouchOSC one at the bottom here, you'll see later. So this is all set up already, right? So now we're going to just make an example of using this data. Now, of course, this is always the question, what do you do with the data? I mean, you've got the data, what are you going to use it for? I mean, in this case, I'm going to just show some simple methods to control things remotely, which you might want to do, you know, if you're just running a show, for instance. But of course, this could be data from a sensor on someone's body or something tracking in the space. These numbers can come from anything, right? I'm not going to open up that ball of wax into all the possibilities, but obviously there's a lot that this could be coming from, right? Okay, but just to start, let's take the Green Bugs movie, which you should have in your file there, and I'm just going to make a little space, and we're going to show our stage again, like so. So we need to add, if you double click on the scene editor and type OSC space L, there's an OSC listener, and we have that set, and it's already coming from channel 1, and that's not the right one. I guess that bottom one is channel 3. So I'm going to change that. So I've set the channel number to 3, and if I move, you see that that is moving. I was just moving this slider down here, okay? All right, so we've got a value. It goes from 0 to 1. So I'm going to hook that to the intensity input of the projector, and I'm going to slide it. But it doesn't work because the intensity wants to go from 0 to 100, but of course the OSC listener, the number coming from TouchOSC, is 0 to 1. That's a place where we need to do some scaling, right? I have a whole tutorial. We did a whole thing on getting into scaling in a previous Guru session, but I will just cover it again briefly. It's so important. 2 ways to do it. I'm going to delete that connection. I deleted the connection, right? You can use a limit scale value actor. We know that it goes from 0 to 1. So that's what we're going to enter in the limit min and limit max. So it's going to take 0 to 1, and then we want it to go from 0 to 100 to control the intensity. That's already set up correctly. So if I hook this output of the OSC listener to the value input, and then the output of this into the intensity, it will take that range of 0 to 1 and scale it up to become 0 to 100. So now you can see I can fade that video in and out by using the controller. Yeah? Okay. That's one way to do the scaling. The other way, which I've done in several other places in this patch, because it's my preferred way, is that you click on the word, the parameter you want to scale, in this case the intensity. It's already ready to go from 0 to 100, so actually that's correct. But the output is where the problem is, or at least in terms of scaling. If I click on the word value here, you see that the limit min and limit max are these special numbers called min and max, which mean minus infinity and plus infinity. What we want is we need to tell Isadora what is the range of this actor. It's not in there already because every open sound control device is totally different. It may have a completely different range. So I'm going to tell Isadora, we observed by sliding the slider that the limit min is 0, the smallest number, and the limit max is 1, right? Now, having set that range, if I go from here to here, Isadora knows the output range, 0 to 1. It knows the desired input range, 0 to 100. And now the scaling automatically happens inside of the wire if you want to imagine it that way, right? So that's a way of doing it. What we're sort of working on, we're having a discussion on the forum right now. You can't see that that's happening. There's no feedback in the user interface letting you know that this scaling is going on, right? Which some people would like to be able to see. We're kind of trying to come up with a solution. It's very tricky. There's not much space left. But I would say, I know for myself, I prefer to do it that way. It's just easier to deal with for me in different situations. However, if you're at the beginning of using Isadora, it's probably good to use a limit scale value actor so you can absolutely see that it is happening there. That's probably a good idea. Okay, I see a question I'm going to ask. Is there any way to export a list? No, I'm sorry, there is not actually a way to export that list that you have in the stream setup window. It's actually a good idea, Sam. Yeah, but no, you have to recreate it each time you do it. So you can always, like, if you get a setup that you like, you can save the Isadora file. The Isadora file will have it in it, and you open it up. If you have only the stream setup and no scenes, you could use that as a starting point. I guess that's one way to sort of move it around from one setup to another, right? That's one way to do it. Okay, so now I'm going to make a little more space between these actors. I'm going to double click on the scene editor, and I'm going to add an HSL adjust, a hue, saturation, and luminance adjust effect. So if I click there, there it is. And I think by now most of you know that when you have a nice straight link like this in a video effect, you can just drag it in and it will become visible. It will become inserted into the scene. I just went here and turned this up so we can see it, right? I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do it with my internal way of doing it. I'm going to click on the word value and say 0 and 1. We know all the sliders go from 0 to 1, right? So click on the word value, set the limit min to 0, the limit max to 1, and we already started with channel 1 here. That was the default for the OSC listener, so that's actually correct already. And now you connect that to the hue offset. To save a little time when doing the limit min, limit max, I'm going to select this OSC listener and say duplicate. And I'm now going to change this number to 2. Because remember, since I duplicated it, the limit min and limit max are already set. We don't have to do that again. So here I go, I take that and go into the saturation input. So now you can see I've got the brightness, I'll leave that up. The first slider, the red one, is doing this hue offset, so it's offsetting the hue, rotating through the various hues that are possible, right? And the green slider is the saturation, except I did something wrong. What did I do? Oh, I didn't actually connect the wire. Here, now it's connected. I didn't click. And then, so now, if I'm up at the top of the green slider, the saturation's like extra saturated, and if I go down to 0, it's black and white, right? So, so that's just a simple example of taking the data in from TouchOSC and using it to control some parameters. One other thing you might like to do is to have a button that's the jump button that goes to the next scene, right? That's an obvious thing. So let's look in our list here, because I actually don't even remember which button I want to use. So I go here, and there's the whole list. Now, I can hit auto detect input, because what I want to see is when I press a button on the iPad, where does it appear in this list? Because I don't know which one is which. So I'm going to press the red button at the bottom corner. Oh, there it is. It's channel 4. And notice how this works. When I hit the button, it's held down. You see my finger's on it. You can't see my finger, but it's there. And when I let go, it goes to 0. This is a momentary button, right? As opposed to the buttons at the top over there, those are toggle buttons. If I do one of those, you see it's 1 now, and it stays 1. And if I click it again with my finger, it goes to 0. So that goes on and off. It toggles. But we want channel 4 here to be our go button, this one here. Boom, 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 boom. So I say, okay. So I just used that window to kind of discover which one of these things I wanted to work with. You can always open it up, turn on the auto detect inputs, and you can see the numbers coming in. It's a great way to figure out what's going on. So we'll double click again, and we have an OSC listener. Okay, we know it was on channel 4, right? So I set the channel here to 4. But here's the thing. I could hook this up directly to a jump actor, but it's actually going to cause a small problem, because you're going to get a number both when you press, that's the number 1, and when you release, that's 0. And when you trigger a jump actor twice, that's used in Isadora to sort of signal an emergency situation. It's like, do the fade now. Just do it. Don't fade. Just complete it. Get to the next scene, right? That's a feature that we have had since the beginning of Isadora, actually. And we don't want that in situation. We don't want it so that the releasing of my finger is going to trigger that sort of emergency jump where it ignores the fade and goes into the next scene. We want it to do the whole fade. So we need to do one extra check. I'm going to double click on the scene editor here, and I'm going to add a comparator actor, okay? Because what we want to do is, we want to say, is the number coming from the value output equal to the number 1? The comparator makes this comparison. So right now, the output is 0, and these triggers, true and false, aren't doing anything. I'm going to press the button, watch closely. Okay, did you see the value input change to a 1? The output of the comparator changed to a 1. It says they're equal. And if you saw it maybe, the true output triggered. I'm going to release the button, watch the false output. It just triggered because I let go and the condition is no longer true. I'll press the button one more time, and you see the true button, the true output triggered, and I let go and it's false. So now we have a situation where we just see the down. We just see that button being pressed down. And now we can add a jump actor. You double click on the scene, add a jump actor, and connect the true output to the jump trigger input. And we'll set this for a 1-second fade, right? So we've got our scene. We can do all these controls. I can fade it in and out. I can change the color and the saturation, go crazy. And then I can hit now this red button. Here we go. And you see it does a 1-second crossfade into a black scene, fading the video out. Okay? So that's it. That's the actual built example of TouchOSC. But I want you to take a moment here. Just take a moment here to conceptualize this with me for a second. It's sort of boring. I mean, actually, this is actually super useful. I'm going to show you a really useful patch in just a second with this. But you can also imagine there are many sensors, and we'll see one at the end with FaceOSC, that allow you to track data from performers or things that are going on in the space or whatever. All of those can be going in to have performer or controlled by the public, if you're tracking the public, of what's going on in Isadora. That is a super powerful thing, and that's what Open Sound Control is great for, because it's very low latency, it's very high resolution, and it's easy, you know, except for setting up that initial thing of getting those IP addresses, it's very easy to set it up and get it working, right? So let your mind kind of expand now to think about all the different ways that, you know, Open Sound Control, like I know that there's a brainwave sensor that you put on your head, and it also outputs Open Sound Control. And so now you can read your brainwaves and use those to control some, let's say, sound in Isadora or some aspect of the video. All of that is possible, right? So just keep that in mind as we go forward. And I'll go back to this thing here, and let's take a look. Now, if you go into the next scenes, you'll see that there's TouchOSC input finished. That's exactly what I just did. It's just so that you've got it for a record, you know, because you were hopefully able to follow along in the other scene, which was empty. I've done that for all the scenes down the road here, okay? Okay, so now let's try something else. Here's another scene, and this one requires a different control, which you probably don't have, but you will see is actually in the folder that I gave you. So let's actually go to the Finder for a second. Let me open this folder. And you'll see that inside of this folder, inside of Guru 9, there are two TouchOSC layouts. There's two files that end in TouchOSC. I made this one, the next one we're about to use, because I wanted a layout that was just 4 XY controllers, right? I wanted that. That didn't exist in the default options. So I made one, and I'm going to show you in a minute how you too can make your own. It's actually super simple. That's one of the other reasons that TouchOSC is so nice, is that you can make your own designs for these controls, right? Okay, but suffice to say I already made that. So in TouchOSC, To change the layout, you click on the little white dot at the top right. If you see where the red is clicking over there? I don't know, I can't point at it. But anyway, the little white dot at the top right, and it goes to the settings window. And you see layout, we did this before, and I click where it says Mix 2, and I'm going to choose the one called Quad XY. That's the one I made. Okay? And you say Done. And now here's my design. These 4 XY sliders that have X and Y, all of them. And what I've done in Isadora is I'm using now an OSC multi-listener, okay? This listener is just like the OSC listener, except if you have a bunch of values that come in on a contiguous set of channels, like 40, in this case, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, you can use the OSC multi-listener to get all of them in one actor. So you say that the base channel, the place we're starting, is channel 40. That's the first one. And then you say there's 8 channels. So this actor is going to read, channel 40, 41, 42, 43 through 47, right? So that is my 4 sliders. And so now watch, if I go here to the top left slider and start to drag it, this is going into a global keystone actor. And this is doing keystoning of the output image in Isadora, right? Just like a keystone on a projector. One thing you have to be aware of with this actor, you can now do this in an actually more convenient way probably in the stage setup editor. But this global keystone affects the entire rest of the show. If these changes we're making, unless you reset them, your thing is going to be all wonky, right? So it's really good to remember, I actually, in the patch, I put in some other global keystones that are at the default setting, so you won't end up with a surprising shape in your, wait, we don't see the output when it is covered in OBS by the iPad image. Can you, from what I can see on OBS, the stage output is visible. I guess I'm going to ignore that comment. That's from any who's in the other room. If that's really something going on, come in and tell me so that I know that what's going wrong, because I can't see anything going wrong at the moment. Okay. All right, so I'm moving this one, and it's adjusting the first 2. That's 40 and 41. This one is 42 and 43, and so on. So here, using this, I can adjust the keystoning of this image, right? Okay, and this works really great. So imagine how nice this is. I used exactly this for some show I was doing. I needed to walk around the theater. I had a bunch of places where I had to do keystoning all over the place, and I wanted a way to be able to do it when I was standing right in front of the thing that was going to be projected on, so I didn't have to do it up from the booth. So I made something like this, set it up in Isadora, and I could walk to every object, and I would just go ba 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 ba, and I would totally keystone it perfectly in seconds. It was done in seconds. It was incredible how fast. All the technicians were like, couldn't believe that I did that so quickly. So that's one of the reasons you might want to use this. Like the fact that this is portable, that it's wireless, that you can go from place to place is a super cool. Let's see. iPad image was covering the actor. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, I will keep an eye on that. It's over to the right. Okay. All right. So anyway, that's just another example of using TouchOSC. And here I made a custom thing. And speaking of my wonderful partner, she made an example that I'm going to show you in a second that will allow us to see how sending data to TouchOSC can work. But that's basically it about getting data from TouchOSC into Isadora. But again, it's not just TouchOSC. We're using that because it's easy to see, it's something you can touch, and it's also a super useful program. Any application that was going to send data to Isadora via open sound control would basically work the same way. We'd need to know the target IP, the IP of the Isadora program on the computer, and the port number, which is generally 1234 unless you change it, right? And then we'd also need to have the send some, we'd be sending OSC addresses, or the OSC addresses coming from the other computer. We see those in the stream setup window. So that's the process, whether it's TouchOSC or another application. For instance, you could have two computers running Isadora, and you could be sending messages to some other computer running Isadora to make it do stuff. That's another possibility, right? So, okay, so that's our bit on input. If you have a question about doing input, of Isadora receiving open sound control, now's a good time to post it while I sort of get ready to start in on the next section, okay? Because now we're going to learn how to have Isadora send open sound control to something else, right? Okay, so to get ready to do that, I have to go back to layout or mix 2, because this next example was designed for mix 2, okay? Question. We will learn how to import a layout into TouchOSC very soon, very soon. I will show you exactly how to do that. Okay, so let's look at sending OSC now from Isadora to something else, right? We're going to have Isadora send OSC messages to another app, right? So just like when we're receiving, we need, forgive me, excuse me, we need to know the IP address of the computer or device on which the app is running, and the port number that it's going to receive on. But you need one further piece of information. You need to know the OSC address, the open sound control address that that device is expecting to receive data on, right? Again, as I said before, it's in the form. It always starts with a slash, and then a word, and another slash, and a word. Maybe could just be one word, but it has that pattern, right? And we're going to see how to do this with TouchOSC, but depending on what app you're using, you probably have no choice but to consult the documentation to find out what those open sound control addresses are. Like, I know of some music software that receives open sound control, and they have ways of controlling the oscillators and the various things like that inside. They have their own addresses like /oscillator/1 for the first oscillator, things like that, right? You have to look this up in the app. There's kind of no way around that to know what those messages are. But in this case, with open sound control, going to the next scene, we can actually see that information, right? And the place we've already seen it is in the stream setup window. So when we read the data from TouchOSC, it sent us those OSC addresses. And so if you're going to send data to, for instance, Fader 1, well, you use the same open sound control address that you used before, right? So that's one way of knowing it, is if you've seen it that way. If you've seen it that way in the patch, right? But another way is to use the monitor window. If the thing is sending some messages to you, and maybe that's a way to see it. One thing you can do, and you should just know about this anyway, is if you go to the Windows menu and say Show Monitor, right? If you're sending messages, it's giving you feedback about, even if it's not in the stream setup window yet, it tells you the name of the message. Can you see here, if you look, it says /1/Fader2. If I do this dial, now it's /1/rotary6, and it says there's one floating point number that comes after that. If I go to the other layout and do this, you see it's /3/x1, XY1, and it has two floating point numbers with decimal points after it, right? So the monitor window is super helpful in also sort of debugging these connections. You can see the data coming in. You'll also see the data from Isadora going out, right? And it shows it both in this kind of human readable way and in this super nerdy computer way with hexadecimal representation. That's if you're like really like to nerd out like I do, okay? So that's the monitor window. That's a super useful tool. By the way, that works for all kinds of messages, serial data and TCP IP data and all kinds of other things. So pay attention to that. That's a good thing. But in TouchOSC, we need to know the IP address and the port. Well, we already saw this. If I click the little white dot at the top again, and we click under Connections, OSC, you see there at the bottom, you've got the port incoming is 9000, and the local IP address is 192.168.0.199. By the way, I didn't mention this, but those are bound to be different on your computer. You can't use the numbers I'm using. You have to look at the ones that are on your computer, right? So now we know where we're trying to send the data, and um, we also know these addresses. I'm just going to look here again. The first three faders, the up and down and the one across the bottom, are fader 1, 2, and 3. That's an easy place to start in controlling this, right? So if we go to the next scene, I go through that monitor window stuff I just talked about, so I'm going to skip that and continue, but at least you've got it written down for some documentation, right? And then here we are in this scene with an OSC transmit actor and some notes about that. It's just what I just told you about getting the IP address. So the first thing we need to set is this UDP address. That's the same as the IP address. 192.168.0.199. Did I forget it already? That's correct, 199. Okay, good. So I've entered the IP address here, all right? And then the port number was 9000, right? And then we saw in the stream setup window, we need to send to /1/fader1. That's the OSC address, right? So we got 192.168, etc., port 9000, and fader /1/fader1. Yeah? Okay. And if I just manually type 0.5 into the value input and hit return, you see the red slider move. 0.9, right? Okay, let's do this in a nicer way. I'm going to add a wave generator to the patch. The wave generator has 0 to 1 for limit min, limit max. This value has min and max, just like the output. We have no idea what the range of anything with open sound control is going to be. You have to discover and learn that, but we now know that everything inside of TouchOSC is 0 to 1. So I set scale min to 0, scale max to 1, and connect this, and oh, I just didn't hit return. And now you can see as the sine wave goes up and down on the wave generator, the feedback, the actual TouchOSC slider, is going up and down. And we can duplicate this and use a different wave generator at a different rate. I'll make this one go a little slower. And I'm going to change this one, change this one to fader 2, right? So there's fader 2, and we connect the output of the second wave generator to the second OSC transmit. Oh, I know what it is. You know, I better explain that. That's my mistake. Even I got fooled. This is a mutable input. Remember, if you learned about in the other Guru sessions, the mutable inputs, the ones with the green dots, they change and adapt to match whatever you connect them to. So even though I typed here, let me type something really outrageous. Hold on, I have to zoom back out for a second. Okay, I'm going to set -500, no, I can't do that. 25 and 75, right? Or whatever, 75. Okay, but that's still mutable. It's not connected yet. When I connect it, it's going to go, oh, I need to change to match everything that matches the output. So I do that, and you'll see it has changed the scale min to 0 and the scale max to 1. Generally, that's what you want. You want mutable inputs to match their outputs. But in this case, we want that scaling to be there. So I have to click on the word value, and I have to type scale max 1 after I've connected it. Okay? Very important moment. But now you can see in TouchOSC that they're all working, right? They're going up and down. And just for one other example, I'll just duplicate the whole thing again and scroll up a little bit. Let me just hide the stage. We don't need it. 0.5 and set this to fader 3. So all three faders are moving there, right? So you can give any kind of output that you want using this system if you wanted to use the tablet as a way of seeing information as opposed to sending information in. And to see that in the finished patch, which is behind this, the next scene, is a duplicate of the first scene, I guess. But then if you go to the scene after that, the one that's called TouchOSC output controls finished. You can see I've got all the sliders going, and I've even got those toggle buttons at the top all responding to this. Okay? All right. So that's how we send data to TouchOSC. But again, that's how we send data to any program that's going to receive open sound control. We need to know the IP address of the device or computer, the port number that the application that's running expects to receive those open sound control messages on, and the OSC address to which you're going to send data. You also need to know the range of data that input accepts, right? Because again, there's no standard for that. It might be 0 to 100, it might be -5 to +5, you never know. You have to check the documentation so that you're not sending values that are out of range, right? Okay. So, okay. So that's how we send data to OSC. I wanted to show one other feature. And so I'm going to switch to the next scene, and if you've got this mix too, you'll see this happen too. Here I'm sending messages that do not do anything. Why is that? Oh, drat, it worked earlier, but it's not working now. That's very curious. Let me copy. I know these IP numbers are right. They look right here too, but I will try and fix this briefly. If I cannot, I will not. Yeah. Oh, drat. I couldn't get this to do what it's supposed to do. It was supposed to change from one tab to the other. And earlier today that was working. Oh. Sorry for the delay. I'm just going to try and fix this so we can use it. I realized that I know why it is. I was using the beta and you can't do what I needed to do in the actual release version because we fixed a bug. You should be able to set the inputs to 0 because this message doesn't have a value after it. It's just the slash and the number. If you send a value, TouchOSC doesn't seem to recognize it. I will try once just in case I can get this to work by this. No, it doesn't want to work. Unfortunately, I will not be able to show you that example where it was going between the two layouts with this version of Isadora. So sorry for that, my mistake. I was programming in the beta, which has a fix in it. We will get that out to you as soon as we can. All right. I do have to at least show, though, even if I'm going to do it manually, because I mentioned that my partner, who's an animator, she said she would like to make a layout, and it was so nice, and that will lead us into how to make your own layouts in TouchOSC. I wanted to show the one that she made. So let's go and hit the white dot, and I'm going to go here. I'm actually going to delete the one that she made so we can go through the process of bringing it in. Okay? And all right, so let's say we want to make our own layout in TouchOSC. We're going to take a little diversion away from Isadora. I'm going to teach you about another piece of software, but this function is one of the reasons I think that their software is great. So I'm going to make open this one that I already have just to get the editor. So this is their editor. This is the editor for TouchOSC, yeah? And I'm just going to create one really fast for you so you can see the process. First, I'm going to click the new button. Now I've got a new thing. Oh, I think I have to, yes, hold on. I will fix that so you can, I can see that you can't see it. Hold on a sec. Okay, now I think you should be able to see the editor. Okay, yes, you can see that, and you can see me there at the right. Okay, so I said new. Let me, you just hit the new button. You get this empty thing. The first thing you want to do is you want to choose what device you have. I have an iPad, so I'm going to click iPad. That gives me the full resolution thing, and I'm going to scale that down to 50% so we can see it. So you have this zoom in here to let you see. So anyway, I'm going to just add in a control. To do that, sorry, I'm reading the questions up there. I was getting distracted. I'm just going to add this XY pad. That's the two-dimensional controller, and you can just grab it by the corners to move it, like so. Make a square here, and let's add one button. I'll just do that. I'll just add a push button, because maybe, like, one of the things that someone did for a show was to add a giant go button as big as the entire iPhone that a performer could carry around in their pocket to hit one button to trigger certain things on stage. That was one way to use this, right? So I'm going to click on this button, and I can't remember. Yeah, I don't know if you can show the text inside the button. I don't think so. There is a way to have a label, so I can add some text here next to the button, let's say. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this. Let's just say that's great. We love this layout, right? Okay, so now I hit this, we're ready to upload this. Oh, let's give it a name though. I'm going to save this, save as example layout. Okay, and now I'm going to hit this sync button. And it tells you after a moment, it says to sync your current layout to the device, make sure your device is connected to the same Wi-Fi, open TouchOSC and navigate to Layout Add, and then select this machine's name from the list to download the layout, right? So now I have to go back to where you can see the iPad, so let's do that. And that should be this one. Okay, so here I am, I'm in that layout already. I hit the white button, I hit Add. It finds my computer, the desert. I hit the desert, and oh, it actually did it without even asking me. It did. I guess because before example layout and say done, there's exactly giant big button and the XY and the little label down there in the corner, right? So it's really that simple. And so that's what you have to do. That's the simple story of making a layout in TouchOSC. It's really, really easy. So there's no reason not to customize your layout and make exactly what you need, right? Okay? But just to show that final example, which you have in your layouts, you can take a look at this. I want to show the one that my partner Annie made because it's just delightful. It's this one. So she made a robot out of the controls, and there's two layouts here, and you can see that it actually moves. And so now if I say sync, all right, because we're going to get this on here, I hit the button, I go to example layout, I say add the desert, it added, it's called Go Figure Anim. I say okay, and I say done, and there you see now on the iPad we have this. Oh, it's working! Oh my gosh, my thing, it does work. The thing I told you before, it does work. There's not a bug, it's perfect. So as you can see, I am sending the message /1, that's layout 1, and the /2 is layout 2, and if we turn the rate up a little bit, the robot will dance for us, okay? What's fun about this is if I touch some of the sliders and the button, then you get an even better animation because it changes like this as you do it, okay? So I'm sure that my friend Rob, who I used to know because we lived in Berlin together, is now rolling over his eyes like this because I made this animation or out of the thing, but I just thought that was really fun to make this animation. But that's just another way you can also tell the iPad to change layouts. I just it wasn't working before because I was using the wrong values from these actors. In fact, I think I set up something special about the layout numbers when I made them in this thing. Okay, it's time for me to take a breather to go back and read questions. So just give me a second to do that. Let's see what people have been asking. Okay, that's a good question. I'm going to turn the animation off so it's not too distracting. Francesco is asking, could you tell me more about the other values you can change in the preference windows, like maximum packets, default data, and maximum data? Sure. Let's hide the iPad for now, and I will just go to Isadora here, and I will open that preferences back up. So the thing he's talking about are maximum packets, default data size, maximum data size. So these control the size of the messages. Normally, open sound control messages are not very big. They're just, 20, 30 bytes at the most, right? But some people were sending massive, gigantic packets that were like 2 megabytes, and they were trying to do this between two computers, and it would crash Isadora. So the maximum packets is how many packets are in the buffer? How many packets can Isadora have in its memory at the same time? If you're sending packets really fast, you want to increase that number, right? Okay. Then there's the default data size. This is like, what is the average of most packets in terms of like, this is generally speaking enough to handle things. In this case, it's 1K, right? Pretty big still, considering those messages are probably 20 or 30 bytes. The maximum data size, Isadora has some special big buffers. If you're really sending gigantic chunks of data, you can set this to a much larger number, like 256K, and you can then allow this to be the most data that you can receive in one open sound control message. So those are the answers to your questions. Perhaps the most important are the maximum packets, is that if you're sending bursts of data and it's overloading Isadora, you may need to increase that number. But remember, if Isadora can't keep up with reading all the data you're seeing it, increasing that number won't help, because eventually it's just going to crash because you've overloaded the buffer, right? So that's Francesco's question. Let me go to the next one. Where do I get the editor? You download that from the site. I have links in the forum post for this to Hexler's website, where they have TouchOSC. The editor is available there. If someone has the link handy, you can post it into the thread. But just go to their website and you can get the TouchOSC editor. Good question. Going from Android to my Mac, input controls work smoothly, but the output is not responding on my phone. Is this because of the different platforms? No, Andy, it should work. I don't have an Android device, unfortunately, to try here, so I can't even try it out to see. But I guess what I can tell you is give it a try, and if you can't get it working, post a question on the forum. I'm sure there's a forum user, someone who has an Android device, who could give it a try too, and we could work it out. I just don't have any Android devices, so I can't really give it a go. But I think if it's there to receive data, unless it's not, if it's missing completely from the Android version, then I think it's supposed to work. So let's see if we can work that on the forum. I can't really help you without having an Android device here. Okay. So I think I answered all the questions up until now. Okay, good. Oh my gosh, we're already in an hour and 15 minutes with you. Who's gonna watch these things? They're too long. Things today need to be like 4 seconds long, or nobody's gonna watch them. That's what I always understand. All right, well, we're not too far from the end, actually. We're kind of to the last couple of things. So let's take a look in the next scene. We're using GyrOSC, a different app, another paid app that I am fond of, because it does a couple things that TouchOSC doesn't do, right? So now we need to go back where you can see the iPad coming in, and that's this one. So there's that's GyrOSC, GYROSC, and the IP address, as I mentioned way earlier in the lesson, that it's 192.168.0.129. That's just always there in the main window. And then the port number is right below it. So you just set that information right there, and then you're good to go in terms of the IP address and port number, right? Then you have all of these things over here about the things that it can offer you as open sound control data. I have the gyroscope, accelerometer, and compass turned on. Those are the things that are on right now. I don't have the other stuff turned on at the moment, okay? And so that's the data it's going to send me. So again, I'm going to make a new patch just from, I said, excuse me, Command N here to make a new thing, because I want to go to the stream setup window and let you see what's coming from this. So there, I just hit auto detect input and all the stuff appeared without me touching it. That's because it's broadcasting this data all the time, right? It's just sending it out as fast as it can. And what you'll see here, now you need to see me holding the iPad. The compass is the first one. That's which direction is it pointing on, to, you know, just like, so I think north is, let's see, I don't actually know where north is here, but north should be 0. That's my guess, because it's in degrees. And as I rotate it, right, it's going to go, you know, 90 degrees is going to be east. I'm pretty sure. I don't actually know for sure. But anyway, you see the numbers going between 0 and 360. Then there's the gyro. That's really great because it tells you the orientation of this thing, of all 3 axes of the device, right? That's different than the thing that TouchOSC does offer, is that the next line is the acceleration. That is, what is the acceleration? You can kind of use that to know the rotation. I know you can't see those numbers going by, but the problem with it is that, like, for instance, you never know this one because that is perpendicular to gravity, right? So you can't know this rotation from the acceleration. So TouchOSC only gives you the acceleration. This one gives you that compass, which works really, and no matter what the orientation of the device is, and the gyro. That's the really important one, the one that I think is cool, right? All right, so that's the data that's coming in. And I've already got that programmed in to the other patch. But the one thing is, remember we talked about you never know what the ranges are. And that's actually, there's a question mark up at the top right of the GyrOSC window. And if you press that, it tells you information about what the various parameters are and how they're measured. So, and the first one at the top, the one that is the one I want to work with anyway, the gyroscope, for whatever reason, the range is plus and minus pi, meaning 3.1415926, etc., right? It's related to something called radians. I kind of know why they did it, but it would have been kind of nice if they just would have converted that to degrees for it so we didn't have to do it. So anyway, and then the accelerometer is plus and minus 3. The compass heading is 0 to 360. Then these have these other parameters we're not going to really use right now. Okay, so the question mark is the documentation. That's where we found out the names. And also, by the way, I should go back there. It gives you the open sound control addresses, right? So the gyro, it's /gyro, and then it's followed by 3 values: the pitch, roll, and yaw. You know, pitch is this way, roll is this way, and yaw is that way, right? It's like an airplane. All right. So we're going to make use of this. And I'm probably just going to go to the finished example to show you. I think it's simpler. But one little thing, there is a bug in this software I want you to be aware of. If you turn something on like this, it actually won't work until you go and you quit the app and you start it up again. Then it's correct, right? And I actually don't want that rotation matrix. I'll do that one more time. That's a little bug I've noticed in GyrOSC. You need to change those settings and you need to basically quit it and reboot it, right? And then it will give you what you expect, right? So now I think it's set the way we want it. Let's just go to the GyrOSC finish so we can just kind of move forward a little more quickly. What I did here was that I made a 3D projector that is receiving the 3 rotations from the from GyrOSC. Let's look in the stream setup for a moment. And here you can see, if I scroll down, if I zoom in, 22 is the compass, and then 23 is the gyro. Remember though, the gyro has 3 values, so it's going to be 23, 24, and 25. Those are the channels on which we're going to receive the roll, pitch, and yaw. Okay? So we've got those here in the OSC listener. I'll just move this out of the way a little bit, right? And you can see that. But then I used a limit scale value to convert from plus and minus pi, minus 3.14, oh, that's actually wrong, minus 3. well, it's close enough. I'm not going to fix it right now. It's 3.1415926. That's how many digits I have pi memorized to. Okay? And it's going to convert that range of plus and minus pi to minus 180 degrees to plus 180 degrees because the rotations expect the inputs to come in degrees, right? So we needed these limit scale values to take that range of numbers that GyrOSC was giving us and convert it into some values that the 3D projector can understand. But now you can see, if I hold this up, can you see how if I rotate the device, okay, that's the yaw, right? That's the one through the y-axis this way. But also, I can do this, and the image rotates that way too. So basically, I can take this, and those compass inputs allow me to rotate this in the same orientation as the device, right? So this was used the first time that I got to know this software. There were some aerial dancers, and the dancer on the silk wanted to have her rotation cause an image below her on the floor rotate with her so that her rotation would be the same as the image on the floor. And we used GyrOSC on a phone to do just that. She wore it just in her belt there, and as she rotated, the compass output, that 360 degrees, was rotating the spin, basically, of that image on the floor, right? So I love this software for the fact that it really gives you that gyroscopic information that you can't really get from TouchOSC. I'm sorry, in terms of Android, I have looked and looked for a good, similar kind of application. I'm kind of shocked that it doesn't exist, but as far as I know, it doesn't. I found one app that sort of does it, but it sends the data out like once every 100 milliseconds. In other words, once every 1/10 of a second. It's not fast enough to be useful. And then there was a setting to turn it up, and the second I did that, it crashed. So right now, in terms of getting this from a device like this, this is the one thing that I know really works, right? But it's really nice and it's smooth. But the other things you might be interested in is that, for instance, one of the things it has in there is GPS. Now, the GPS only updates. Let's just turn that on for a second. And then I will, of course, have to quit it again and come back. But like now it's broadcasting that GPS data. And if I go to the stream setup and I say auto detect input, there's the GPS, and there's 6 numbers coming in. That's described in the help. But what I can tell you is that it only updates like once a second. It's not as fast as the other ones, okay? I'm going to just give that a channel number. And if we look at it, you can see there that it's latitude, longitude, altitude, course, speed, and time. So I don't know what exactly you do with that, but I guess the latitude and longitude, that's not going to be down to a few inches. It's probably down to several meters, or maybe even 100 meters. I don't know. But anyway, it's sort of interesting. It also has the altitude, right, in there. And the other one I will draw your attention to that's sort of interesting is the magnetic field. This is part of measuring its orientation in space, but what's interesting about it, for the heck of it, I turned that on, and I took a refrigerator magnet from my fridge, and I just kind of waved it around the device, and it totally measured that. Like, it could see that I was moving my hand with the magnet, and the magnetism was being picked up at a fair distance, and I could so you could imagine giving that to a member of the public. Maybe you want to have an interactive situation where they're touching it, they have a thing that they pick up, and inside is a magnet, and this can be picked up by the device, right? Okay, so I'm seeing people say that there's stuff for Android, okay? I think OSC was the one that I tried that is too slow. And the one that crashed when I tried to turn the speed up. But let's please go to the topic in the forum. If you know about Android stuff that does this compass thing, I want that. So please let me know. All right, but that's basically just the thing with GyrOSC. I just wanted to show it because it has some special features that work really nicely in terms of this compass measurement. And it's just another example of Isadora receiving OSC and doing something cool with it, right? All right. We have one last topic. It's already almost an hour and a half. We're going to finish up. And this is just a brief example of one thing because there's a really by now pretty old app called FaceOSC. And it tracks actually your face. I can turn off the iPad now. So we're going to take a look at FaceOSC because it tracks your face when it works. And so it's quite an old program. Let me open it up here. And let's see, first of all, okay, it's sort of working. Yeah, it's actually working pretty good in this light. It likes to have a lot of light. It does not like to have a lot of contrast. See, there's making freaked out of my glasses. I might have to take my glasses off. Let's see. Yeah, that probably works better without the glasses. It's not, you shouldn't really, I can't say that this is something super reliable for a show, but it gives us one little problem that we need to deal with that I needed to give an example of. However, when it does work, it's nice. It actually works well. I actually am going to try turning on this other light, and you're going to get blinded for a second because see, when I turn on the other light and it's a little bit brighter, it really does a much better job. Now it's really following me, right? It measures a bunch of parameters. It measures things like how far, where are your eyes at, and where's your head at in space, and different things like that, right? It's also nice because it has a siphon output, so it will send the picture you're seeing in front of you out to Isadora. So I'm going to check that because we're actually going to use that in just a moment. And then, if you want to try this, if you have FaceOSC open, you can open this patch I made called FaceOSC, right? And you can just try it immediately, yeah? So it's set up to track my face. And you see now the siphon input, let's just look down here. I've got a siphon receiver set to receive from FaceOSC going to the projector. By the way, in case you didn't read the forum post, this is Mac and Windows actually, so you can run it on Windows. But to do this communication on Windows, I'm not positive that it offers spout output, which is the equivalent to siphon. It might have been made before spout, so you might not be able to take this image in to the Windows version like you can on the Mac OS, right? Okay, but that's, so we've got the image in Isadora so we can see that lovely wireframe, but you'll notice the OSC listeners aren't doing anything. Why is that? Because FaceOSC works on a fixed port number that you can't easily change, right? And so we're going to need to change Isadora's port number because it's not so easy to change FaceOSC's port number. I believe that it's going to be, I wrote it down somewhere. It was in the other patch, right? I think it's, let me just look. I know how to find out. Sorry, I just have to open this file to remind myself. Okay, it is port 8338. That's actually the place you can change it. There's a settings file and XML file. You can go edit some stuff in there. But I wanted to show this because some software doesn't allow you to actually change this port number, and you need to know how to deal with it. So, as you saw before, if I go into the Isadora preferences and I click on MIDI Net tab, the port number that Isadora uses to receive data is there, right? So what we need to do is change that to 5338. Let me just check my work, make sure I'm not making a mistake. No, 8338, sorry, 8338. You should do this too. If you want to try FaceOSC, you should try this, right? So now, keep in mind, all the stuff that I programmed with TouchOSC on 1, 2, 3, 4 no longer works. If I wanted TouchOSC and FaceOSC to work at the same time, I would have to go and change the port number in TouchOSC or GyrOSC to 8338 so they can all send data to Isadora at the same time. I'm not going to go change those the stuff on the iPad right now, but I am going to change this to 8338 and say OK. And it tells you have to restart Isadora to do. Wait. All right. And wrong file. Let me get FaceOSC open. Right. Did I open the right copy? No. I guess I was using the beta, wasn't I? I was using the beta. Oh, Mark. Anyway, no harm done, I guess. Okay. All right, let me just go with the 307. I don't know what was going on there, why that didn't stick. Sorry for the delay, everybody. 53, oh no, 83, 38. Okay. Yes, I know. I need to quit. Let me just see the number again. Yes. Now I'm going to check that it really changed. Yes, 8338. Good. Now, don't know quite what happened there. Now I'm running. Now you'll see, look at all the OSC listeners. They're all moving, right? Because now, if I show FaceOSC, and you can see, I am tracking the position of my head in a sort of limited space. It's not intended to follow me. I'm just measuring the height of my mouth. Wah, 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 ah. I've got a very big mouth, right? You all know that for a long time. So here I'm taking the open sound control data. I've measured, earlier I went and measured, for instance, the OSC channel 2 is the position of the face horizontally. And I kind of watched that and I saw, oh, it kind of goes to minus 50, it goes to 490, and over here is like 290, okay? And then for up and down, I just did the same. I kind of observed those numbers. I entered them into the limit min and limit max, and then scaled that so it would become minus 50 to plus 50, because that's what the shapes actor needs to move that shape around, right? And then the other thing, channel 9, is the height of the mouth. Again, if we go to the stream setup, you see here, there is on channel 9, gesture slash mouth slash height. So that's the, or the mouth width is also measured. I could also be doing that, right? Where your eyebrows are also important for inflection if you're doing animation and things. So anyway, the point is, I mostly just wanted to use FaceOSC because it's another interesting application. It is very sensitive to light, so if you really want it to work, you have to be, I think, in a controlled lighting situation. But it's funny, I don't know if I can really talk to you while that thing is like following my mouth around. But you get the idea. Question, FaceOSC doesn't show a picture. Any idea why? I heard someone say if you're on Catalina that there was maybe a problem with it working on Catalina. I did not have time today to run it on Catalina. I'm running on Mojave right now, so it could be that. But if you're not on Mojave, I'm not sure why it wouldn't be working. We can, if you, we can open this up to the forum if you need help with that, right? So I think that's basically what I wanted to show. That was just kind of a quickie, mostly to show to dealing with the problem of changing the port number, right? We needed to change the port number because FaceOSC didn't allow it, and just to let you see a different kind of tracking app that maybe you might find useful for something, right? So that kind of closes out what we were up to today. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to go to the webcam only over here. So that's what we had to work on today. Very bright light. I won't blind you with my glasses. I hope that that gave you a lot of ideas of how to use Open Sound Control. I'm just going to fill here for a second because of the delay, so if you have some final questions, I can try to answer them. But I'm really curious to see how you are using Open Sound Control and what kinds of things you run into or what kind of great solutions you find. I'm going to turn this light off, actually. If you do come up with some things, please post them in the forum post or post them in the comments below. We're going to actually start responding to YouTube comments. I know it's another place where we're putting information, but if you're doing stuff, we want to also follow your exploits on YouTube. If you find a great solution or do something cool with Open Sound Control, let us know. The version of FaceOSC is 1.1. I think that's the last one that was ever made. It's pretty old by now. So that was one of the questions that just appeared. And then I'm seeing that, yes, it could be a Catalina problem. The person that was trying to run it and couldn't run it. How do you change the port in the XML file? All right, let me go back to show you how to do that. I just need to switch screens here again. So to change the XML file, you find FaceOSC, the app, Open Frameworks. Oh shoot, I messed up my thing. Just going to turn off the iPad for now. All right, so you have to find the FaceOSC app, so I'm going to do that here. So here's FaceOSC. You on Mac OS, I think it's just, you'll find this XML file right with the application on Windows. That's my guess. I did not look at this. But on Mac OS, you say Show Package Contents, and then you go into Contents, into Resources, into Data, and you will find a file called settings.xml. In there are various settings that you can change, including the IP, the port number. You can go change it to 1234, and then it will be compatible with Isadora in that way. But it's up to you what happens. You can also change, I guess maybe the only other really thing that I really found important, there's a device number here. If I zoom in on that, it says camera, device, and it has a 0. When I had 2 cameras hooked up, I could switch that to camera 1, which was not the camera that's on me now, but the laptop's camera, right? So you can change the camera device. There's some other things about iteration, settings, clamp, tolerance. That has to do with the analysis. I have no idea what that means. So you're on your own if you mess around with those. So that's the answer to that question, okay? So let me now go back to the webcam only and ask if there's any more. Great session, too short. It's 100 hour and 40 minutes. Oh goodness. Okay, well, if your XML is if you're on Windows, maybe the XML file is different. I don't know. I wish I had enough time to do these on every single platform. I don't always have enough time because there's a lot to do to prepare. But if you need help in the forum, if it doesn't work for you, ask about it. I'd be happy, or one of our team will be happy to help you, right? Any last questions before we end up here? Okay. Well, I downloaded this. Let me just go ahead and show you how I found this when I downloaded it, so that you can do the same. So if I go to here's Safari. If you go to the search, if you type as a search term FaceOSC followed by GitHub, I think, yes, you will go directly to this URL. It says releases, Kyle McDonald, and then FaceOSC is the downloads are right there, right? So I leave it. I don't know why the XML file would be different. Maybe it's on Windows, but this is where I got the file I got, and that's what it says. Okay? All right. Any other final questions? Oh, I just, you couldn't see me because I did the mistake again of not showing the screen. Let's go to the screen one more time. I'll do this once again. One more time. Okay, there. FaceOSC GitHub, right? This is the search term that I used. FaceOSC GitHub. If you search that, you will find this face tracker, and at the bottom, that's where I got the links. So hopefully that's where you can get them too. All right? All right. I think we should call it a night and an afternoon and a morning, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for coming. I hope that that was informative. Ask your questions in the forum. On remember, the link to this forum topic is all the way at the top. And just let us know what you find out, what you need. We can certainly try to help you go further with this. And let us know what other ways you use Open Sound Control. And again, please subscribe, and also please spread the word. Like I said, on Friday, we're going to really see what we can do with Isadora to support remote performance. And I think that's going to be a topic that's interesting beyond just the folks that are here often, but maybe a larger group. That might be a great way to let other people know how much you love Isadora. So I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, day, evening, morning, night, midnight, whatever you're at. And I will see you on Friday. And keep well and keep safe, and see you soon. Bye-bye.